I think I cut myself off in the last video, so I'll start from the beginning of this DQ. So we're gonna try and read data from our buffer. So we would call the DQ function. Um, Let me go. So we would just go like Q, DQ, and then use our pointer, which is my buffer, and that's it. You call that, and you're gonna read. Of course, this will be in a separate line. But anyways, this you call your function, your DQ function, and you're gonna read start reading data from your buffer. And remember, the head hasn't moved; the head's still set to 0. So you're gonna be reading from the beginning of your array, and it checks. It takes an unsigned character, creates a kind of like a temporary variable, myt, initializing it to 0. I think the volatile is to keep when you're calling functions. It's something to do. I think I forgot what I had to do. It has something to do with not losing data when you're outside of main or something. Anyways, I'm sidetracking myself. But it creates a temporary variable myt, initializes it to 0. Then it looks okay. We're gonna call the is the buffer empty function, because if the buffer is empty, then we don't need to read anything from it. So the empty just compares the size, which in this case is 8. Is it equivalent to 0? No, it's not equivalent to 0. So the buffer is not empty. So move to the next line. Now here it's going to assign myt. Remember, it's an unsigned character. It's going to assign it to the wherever the head is pointing to in the data buffer, which is the 0 indexer. Because remember, the head hasn't moved, and we have our letter A in here. So myt is now equal to the hex equivalent of A. And then in this line, it'll advance the head. So because we've read this, so we're going to advance the head by 1. And then this always confused me why it was set to 0. And what that does, I believe, is it clears the it clears out the A and sets this to 0 now, which was from the video, the original video. UNC was for troubleshooting. Alright, so now there's a 0 in here. And then another modulus here is the head equal to Q size. And the is there a remainder? So the head is 1. 1 divided by 8. There's still a remainder, so the head stays here. And this looks like, it does the same function as the tail does up here. So when the head gets to 8, and then performs the modulus, 8 divided by 8 leaves no remainder, and so it goes to 0, and kicks the head back to the beginning. Hence you have that circular rotation in the buffer. And then obviously our size is going to get decremented. So now it's going to go to 8, go to 7. Because now we only have 7 pieces of data left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 pieces of data that we haven't used. So we'll call the DQ again. Let's read the next character in our array. So once again, it creates a temporary variable here, myT, initializes it to 0, checks if the buffer is empty. So our size is our size equivalent to 0. Our size is not equivalent to 0. So the buffer is not empty, has something in it. And so it goes on to the next line and assigns the unsigned character myT. It assigns it where the head is pointing to. In this case, it's our first indexer, and we have the character 2 inside there. So it's going to assign 2 to myT. And I forgot to mention last time, when it gets to the bottom after the size decrement, how do you get your value? Well, it returns myT as part of the function. So you just assign your own variable to myT, and it'll dump it in there for you. So getting back to here, so we have the 2 is now assigned to myT, and then the head is incremented 1, and this is set to 0 to clear out that part of the array. And then our modulus, so the header is 2 divided by 8, leaves a remainder, so the head will stay at 2, and the size will decrement to 6. And then it'll return myT. So you get your value, and basically it's the same thing. Once again, as long as each time you call, it's going to increment to the next one and read the value that's in there. It's zeroed out and decrease the size. So as you keep reading data from the buffer, the head will jump forward and keep incrementing until the head is equivalent to 8, and then the modulus will kick in. 8 divided by 8 leaves no remainder, and it'll kick the head back to 0, and the head will end up back at the beginning. And you've decremented each time, so now your size will be equal to 0. And then if you try to call the read function again, everything is at 0, and you go to the is the buffer empty, and then your compare size will be at 0 at that point, and it is equivalent to 0, so the buffer is empty, and then it won't execute the rest of these lines because there's no point in reading an empty buffer. So that's the basics of that. I'm sure I made a few screw ups here and there, but that gives you a general idea of what's going on, and line by line in this code. What's going on as far as dumping data into the buffer and extracting data out of it, and obviously by changing your queue size, you can make the buffer as big or as small as you want. Enjoy.